Call the school board meeting to order. George, could you take roll?
Colonel Evans?
Here.
Mr. Grozan?
Here.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Here.
Mr. Miko?
Here.
Mr. Naso?
Here.
All present.
Stand for the pledge, please. Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pledge done. District goals. Talk about our district goals every meeting. Our first one, of course, is student achievement, our primary directive, and the supporting goals are financial prudence and community engagement. Tonight, everything on our agenda will reflect those goals, and we'll do our best to meet them, knowing that especially goal number 1 and 2 sometimes are offset from each other, and that, we have to be reasonably prudent with the funds that we have. We have to maximize every dollar and do the best we can. So we weigh that out. Next, we move on to public comment. I don't see any green slips anywhere. No public comment. George, treasurer's report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Naso. I have 2 items on a discussion item and 1 item for your consideration. The first discussion item is the financial summary report for fiscal year 2017. At the end of June 30th, we closed out the books for fiscal year 17, and July 1, we opened the books for the new fiscal year / school year. I just want to give an update on how we performed last fiscal year in comparison to the 5-year forecast. As you know, the 5-year forecast we do twice a year, in May and October. So this is a reflection against the May forecast, and in October, once we have staffing finalized and the budget finalized, we'll update the forecast in October. So I'm going to go to the podium to present the update. So the 3 categories I'm going to talk about are the general fund revenues, expenditures, and the summary at the end. Moving into the revenues. Overall, we received $73.4 million in revenues, of which 69% or $50 million was made up of local taxes, and that's our biggest chunk. Next is 13.4% or $9.9 million state foundation, and then our state Ohio reimbursement, which was 6.1, which is our homestead and rollback allocation, which is made up of 6.1 or 8.2%. Then our tangible personal property, which we're receiving this year, is made up of 3.1, and that is being eliminated, of course, from the state budget the upcoming fiscal year. And then our TIF revenues of 2.1 and other revenues of 1.7, which brings it to a close. So revenues by category, property taxes, received $145,000 more in property tax revenue as part of the May advance. I was estimating $100,000. We received $245,000, but this is a net, or timing of the advance, so it's just going to reduce the amount from this year's property taxes for this upcoming settlement in the fall. Our state foundation was estimating 12.1, and we received 12.1, so that came in on target. Our state harmless reimbursements, we received 7.1 million, or estimating 7.1 million. We received 7.1 million. And as you see, it's been decreasing from year to year from the previous years, and that's because of the TPP reimbursement phase out. Other revenues, I was estimating 3.7 million, or 3.7 million. We received 3.9 million. The increase of $200,000 is due to an additional 100,000 Medicare reimbursements for a total of 248,000 reimbursement. Interest was 75,000 more than forecasted, and then full-day kindergarten, I received 57,927 more than estimated due to the additional section that was added. And then also pay-to-play was $28,000 more, which was increase in sports, and also from the policies that we added as well. That students couldn't pay unless they paid, so that was lax in previous years. Now we've implemented a policy which we saw a greater return on collection. At the end of the year, we were still waiting $145,000 in tuition from other districts. That's typically received in May. The state changed their software that was reported on, and we received it this month. So overall, our other revenues came in more than we anticipated. So leaving general fund, total revenues, anticipate 73.1, we received 73.4 in total, and it was mainly due to the other revenues. General fund expenditures, where does our money go? Our total expenditures for the year were 67.6 million, of which 81.8% was salaries and benefits, which is our highest category, which represented 55.2 million. Then purchase services, 6.7 million. Materials and supplies, 1.9 million. Equipment, 900,000. And then other objects, 2.8 million, which other objects is made up of general fund debt, audit fees, county auditor fees of $1 million, bank fees, and transfers of other funds.
Excuse me, George,
Yes.
but salary and benefits, there's a difference from the slide, that slide to here. Is the slide updated?
Do you have 83.2?
Yes,
Yeah,
No, I thought you said 81 point something.
he's got 81.8.
yeah, the slide is updated. I must have forgot to update the print. I updated after the printouts.
Okay.
I thought I printed new ones, but the new ones must be on my desk.
We were
Which I
being
thought
very
was the old
prudent,
ones.
very prudent by not reprinting in color ink again, so we're,
Yeah.
No,
I'm
I did
just
print.
thinking if
I
anybody
did
else,
print them. I think I just passed out the wrong ones.
if anybody else picks it up, that's all,
Yeah.
because for us, we understand.
I appreciate it. And the difference is, you probably see a difference in the other objects.
George,
I didn't
can
have a
ask
number in there.
quick question?
Yeah.
The county auditor charges the school district $1 million?
Yeah, it's a percentage, it's about a percentage of the property taxes received. So it all depends on how much they collect in property taxes.
You see how much they charge us to collect the taxes?
I'm just
It's ridiculous.
taking money out of a public school district. That's all I was just curious about. Okay, thank you.
Everybody's got their hand in your pocket, George, you know that.
Absolutely.
Salaries, I forecasted 39.4 million. Salaries came in at 39.4 million. It was 15,000 difference in the May forecast. Benefits, forecasted in May, 16 million. We expended 15.9. We were 100,000 under the forecast, which was primarily due to a workers' comp bill that came in better than anticipated, which was received at the end of May. So what we had to anticipate the bill for the forecast, and we anticipated up, and it came in better than we anticipated. Purchase services, forecasted 8.1 million, actual expended 6.7 million. Total purchase services 1.4 million under the budget. Primarily that was made up of $300,000 in utility savings, which 200,000 was of electric and 125 of water and gas. So beginning of the year, it looked like utilities were going to be a lot more than at the end of the year. Started trending favorably, and we took a few buildings offline, so it's starting to trend out. And also, if you look at 2016, the previous year, we were $200,000 less compared to 2016 in utilities.
How's the new middle school doing?
It's doing good. I mean, it's a big building. In comparison to Center and Albion, it's a little bit more, but it's more coverage, and it's used a lot more than
And also,
the other buildings.
It's
and you also
fully air
have-
conditioned.
It's fully air
Yeah.
conditioned.
And there's Chromebooks.
Yeah, yeah.
but all in all, we're down $200,000 from the previous year, and that's
Right.
reflects the actions that we're taking.
Remember, Drake cost us just electric alone, because it was all electric, close to $125,000 per year.
And then the other big chunk of savings was our tuition savings. And we have tuition, we had open enrollment, 140,000 that we've paid out. Charter school deduction, 750,000. Special tuition and settlements of 1.1 million. CCP, College Credit Plus, payments of $272,000, and Ed Choice for the Peterson and Autism Scholarship of $570,000. So where we got the savings there was in the special ed tuition settlements we received, not received, but we kind of estimate a little higher on those numbers because you never know the kids that you're going to get during the school year and their needs. So there was a savings there and a little bit of savings in the College Credit Plus from what we have estimated.
George,
And
what was the specific number that we pay out to charter schools?
$750,000.
So annually, we're paying $750,000 to private, profitable educational organizations.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Materials and supplies on the next slide. 2017, we forecast it's 2.3 million. We expended 1.9. We were 400,000 under the forecast, which primarily was 200,000 of that was for bus fuel and parts. Might need to look on how we budget that in the future. The gap, we've been budgeting the same number for the previous years because we never know what's going to happen with gas prices. So as gas prices continue to stay low, that number's been low, and it comes to the point, do we reduce the budget for that? And then if it goes up, do we increase it, or do we just let it go and see how gas prices go? So it's something we're looking at for this upcoming year.
I would think you'd want to get that thing more, that, you don't want to take all the, take it down to maybe not current pricing, but the number you're using is high, and it's going to be high for,
Right.
that number's going to be a high estimate for a while.
Right, we're seeing a trend
Yeah.
right now that seems pretty consistent. And then we also had 200,000 of outstanding purchase orders not spent in 2017, which were carried into fiscal year 18. Equipment, we were 100,000 under the forecast, but that 100,000 was carried over into the upcoming fiscal year. If you recall, in the June agenda, we had some board approvals for some technology purchases that carried over into this fiscal year.
Have we done our bus inspections for this year? Has the highway
Yes.
patrol come out and looked at them?
Yes, the bus inspections were finished earlier this week, last week. There were 2 buses that we did not put up for inspection because based on our mechanics, we needed to put them out of service. All other buses have passed. So that's
Will you be
good news.
looking just to replace 2 then?
No, we need to continue to replace. We'll have on the next board agenda, we're gonna move tonight's to the next board agenda, but 5 buses. There will be some years in the next few. Steve's gonna have to take a look at that, but I know we originally projected there's a few years in the future we can reduce the number of buses. But in terms of the sub buses we need, the number of athletic shuttles we're doing, we don't have many reserve buses, so this is necessary to keep our fleet up to speed.
Okay.
The next slide 17, other objects. We had forecasted 3.1 million, we spent 2.9. We were under forecast by 200,000, and there's some expenses there that, now that I've been here a couple of years, starting to see a trend that we can reduce the budget there for a little bit, so kind of reanalyzing the budget on some of these objects there. So all in all, it's a consistent trend over the past couple of years. So overall, general fund expenditures, forecast is 6.9 million, spent 6.6 million. That's a difference of 2.3 million or 3.2%. To me, we didn't hit the forecast, but the target we kind of try to aim at is anywhere between 3 and 5%. Anything under 3 is better, but a lot of the non-personnel lines, when you're getting close to the end of the year, it's variable on the needs and the timing when goods and services are needed. So overall, how does that play into the forecast? This next slide, this is the forecast that was presented in May on our financial position. We're forecasting to end the year at 20.5 million. Then in 2021, our deficit would have been 5.9 million. Moving in with the actuals on the next slide. I updated 2017 actuals, and the only updates that I made in the out years for the forecast was I made the adjustment to the property tax revenues due to the advance, then also the state funding formula. I changed the guarantee to a 2% phase out for 18 and 19 based on the governor's budget. And then also kept 2021 at 90%, just not sure what's gonna happen in those out years. Expenditures I didn't adjust in the future years. This will be reflected in the May 5-year forecast. And then as you see, based on the results of this year, we ended fiscal year 17, 23 million, which brought down our 2021 deficit to 1.6 million, which if these numbers in here for 18, 19, 20, 21, they're our budgeted numbers. If we continue to see anywhere between a 3 to 5% difference in spending to the forecast, 2021 will be manageable. But the main thing, the alarming thing is not the end of year balance, because we don't want to get that close. It's the revenues over expenditures where that's starting to creep up, and it's largely part to the TPP funding that was taken away. So if we had that additional $3 million per year, at least for the next 2 years, we'd probably be okay for revenues over expenditures, and even the life of the forecast would all be in the black.
So the flip, if you look at the actual, we picked up, the general fund went up by $5.8 million this year, right? If you look at that 5.8 in the bracket, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Some noise in the encumbrances.
right,
Next year, we're looking at a 2.6 flip on that, right?
right.
So that's about, what is that, 5.8? I should be able to do this in my head, but
8.4.
8.4. So you got an 8.4 flip, and 4 of it's related to the TPP, right?
Right.
So that makes there's another 4 in there that, and I realize there's increases in, contractual, union agreements and some other things, but it seems like maybe in that 4.4, there's some opportunity,
Mhm.
I mean, the others, it's guaranteed to lose the TPP, but maybe there's some opportunity in that to do better.
Right.
So, I mean, we beat it by 3 this year, maybe we can.
Yeah, we're constantly looking
Yeah.
where there's opportunity, and I know the longer I've been here, the more I'm starting to see things trend out and have a better handle on how the expenditures are going to go. So where there's areas for opportunity, we can adjust and try to keep the target number for each year about 3 to 5, and my goal is not to be at the 5, it's to be at less than the 3% target to actual versus what to projecting.
Will you be ready to adjust by, you were talking about the trends in fuel and things like that. Will you be ready to do that for the October forecast?
I'm planning on it, yeah.
Okay. Because it's nice to see those numbers, but if we're fooling ourselves if we know that we are overestimating,
Right,
and it's better to be accurate.
right,
I mean, it certainly looks nice,
right,
but from a budgeting standpoint, you want to be as accurate as possible.
right. That's all I had on this. If there's
Good job.
no other questions.
It's good. Thank you.
And then the next 2 items, discussion item for the OASBO Capital Conference, or the Ohio School Boards Association Capital Conference, which is November 12th through the 14th. Have it on this agenda as a discussion item. We'll have the vote at the next board meeting. I believe the last several years and probably more, I think Richard's been our delegate.
Please, someone fight me for it.
Carl's been our alternate. So turn it over for any discussion.
I'm busy.
All in favor of Duke going, raise your hand.
I'm not going.
Okay, well, we'll figure that out.
Okay. And the next item I have is the cafeteria change fund for $950. It's on the consent calendar, and this is just startup money for the
Do
cafeteria.
we really have to have a $950 item on the agenda?
Yeah, they give it to us at the end of the year, and then it's an annual routine item. It's more for-
Every penny counts.
I reckon so. I'm certain it does, but I don't want to see it on the agenda.
That's concludes my report.
All right, thank you.
You're probably done. navigate that.
Superintendent's report?
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. I'd like to share with the board some policy recommendations from the Wellness Committee. So obviously, we know we have a policy committee. Ms. Ludwig, Mr. Micko sit on that policy committee. And previously, we reviewed policy 8510, which is the wellness policy. It also has in there that we have to have an ad hoc wellness committee to review the policy and provide recommendations, to which we sent to the board earlier. But our lovely ad hoc committee is here with us tonight. And I'm going to ask them to come to the podium when it's their turn, or if you all want to go up there together. But what we want to do, I've given at your seat a version of the updated policy, and what we thought we'd do is highlight just those sections that have changed from what was originally proposed from the policy committee to our ad hoc group. And the first thing, they're broken into sections, so you'll see on page 1, it'll say with regard to nutrition education. Well, in terms of nutrition education, the Wellness Committee made no changes. What the policy committee originally recommended, we agreed with and kept that the same. And next, I'm going to ask Mr. Marino, principal of Kinsler, to come on up. He's going to highlight some of the differences and recommendations. These will be covered in pages 4 to 8 in terms of physical education requirements. Adam?
Evening, everybody. So in the physical education, I am on page 4. That one, the top one there, was what was originally on there, and so we kept that first one. So the changes here, we had some additions. So I'm skipping page 5, and I'm going to page 6. So on page 6, the second one down, we have the sequential comprehensive physical education curriculum shall stress the importance of remaining physically active for life. And we thought as a committee, that's kind of what we call in education, the essential questions. It's a big question of physical education. It's why we have the class. We want them to remain physically active for life. That's kind of an underlying theme in all of the lessons. So we thought that was appropriate for staying or adding into this policy. Going down to 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth one down, it says teachers properly certificated, licensed in the subject area of physical education shall provide all instruction in physical education. This, years ago, the license have changed and certificates have changed. You could have had just a 1-8 or K-8 license and could have taught physical education. I actually taught PE like 7 years ago, and I'm not licensed to do physical education, but that has since changed, and so now we obviously want all of our physical educators to have a license in physical education. So that's why we thought that was appropriate. Moving down to the last one on that page, planned instruction in physical education shall teach cooperation, fair play, and responsible participation. So obviously we thought this reflected what is currently happening. On page 7, or the second one from the top,
Is that how you guys did it in the Air Force, Colonel?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
second from the top, planned instruction in physical education shall include cooperative as well as competitive games, and underline there is including those who are not athletically gifted. So as a school district, we believe we should include everybody, no matter their talents or ability level, and we compared physical education to math or reading. If they're not good at math, we're not going to kick you out of math. We're not good at reading, we're still going to try and teach you reading. So we thought just because you're not athletically gifted, we're still going to try and educate you in physical education. So we're teaching everybody. The bottom two there have to do with head injuries or concussions. The first one specifying the communication when there is a head injury or a suspected head injury or concussion. It talks about the communication. And the second one, the last one, talks about that the student cannot return unless they have a physician's approval. They're not permitted to participate. And that follows our head injury protocols that are taking place all through athletics and thought appropriate for physical education as well.
So can I interrupt for a moment? So does that mean like our elementary physical education teachers have been trained to know what concussion signs are? And is that part of their curriculum that they get before they get here, or do we teach it to them here in district?
I believe it, well, they do have that training if they're certified in
Okay,
physical
so that's part of their
education.
certification
So
already.
Public school works as well,
Public school
yeah,
works, yeah.
public school, works. So all the teachers in our district get training through online modules of what that looks like and signs and symptoms and what to do
Okay.
for head injuries.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Adam? Thank you, Adam.
All right,
Adam.
thank you.
Next up, we have Vicki Turner, who's gonna start on page, I think she starts on page 9, 8 or 9?
It's 8 on mine.
It starts on page 8 with physical activity.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I have just a few additions. We added under physical activity and movement shall be integrated when possible across the curricula and throughout the school day. And so Adam touched on that a little bit, given how important physical movement is to our students, not just in a PE class. We felt that that would be a good addition.
Hey, Vicki, hold on a second. What
Yes.
about the one above that?
That was always there. So the
Okay,
physical.
it's in black on our thing, so it looks like it's an ad.
Yeah, that's just what happens in the policy when you select one of them. So the shall was, we had to choose shall or should, and the policy committee originally chose shall. So that's no change from what was there.
I guess the problem I have with that is that I don't see anything wrong if a kid acts up in gym class with making them run a few laps. You know, I mean, just coddling people all the time is not a good thing, because they never learn. But if it's just me, it's just me. But I can remember I got to run plenty of laps and do plenty of push-ups, and I don't think it killed me.
You were a
so.
problem child.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are some kids that are headstrong, and that, you know, if you have a coach out there, it beats giving them detention or something silly like that, you know, that they have to stay after for a gym class problem, but just my thought,
Thank you.
I'm with you, Duke.
I've had run laps too.
yeah.
The next addition is on page 9, and we added, the school shall partner with families and community organizations to support physical activity of all sorts. And we thought that that was another important piece, that we would work with community and other organizations. And then on page 10, really was only the addition of the 7, I believe. All students in grades 7 through 12 shall have the opportunity to participate in interscholastic sports programs. That was it for that section.
Any questions for Vicki on that section?
Thank you.
Will we ever be in a position where we can say the 6th graders going into the middle school can either participate or practice with the 7th or 8th graders in a sport? Or is it budgetary constraints, or is it just something that we need to work on? It's gonna take a lot longer than just, you know.
It's Ohio High School Athletic Association
Is
rules.
it?
Yeah. So in terms of who could participate, contact with the coaches, all of that piece of it, there's nothing to say like club sports or things of that nature, but those are typically taken care of by the community you live
Sure.
in. But yeah, the reason schools follow that is it's an OHSA rule.
I get the question a lot, so that's,
Yeah.
at least I can clarify that
Sure.
now. It's a state of Ohio rule. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
And I believe, Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a few years ago, we had a running club.
Yep.
And they wanted to run with the cross-country kids, and and the coaches said we would supervise them and it's fine, but we weren't able to, had to be
To
two
administer.
separate, you know.
Got it.
Speaking of running, next up is our resident community runner and former PTA council president. Laura, she's gonna talk about other school-based activities, which that starts on page 11.
All right, good evening. Third up from the bottom on page 11, we added students, parents, and other community members shall have access to the school's outdoor physical activity facilities outside the normal school day at Strongsville Middle School. When the new facility was put in, the football field and the track, there was a turnstile put on that with the idea that it would be open to community members in the evenings and on weekends. And I thank you for that. On page 12, we added the third down. Schools in our system utilize electronic identification and payment systems, therefore eliminating any stigma or identification of students eligible to receive free or reduced meals. It's kind of self-explanatory. We don't want to single anybody out who might be on those programs and need assistance. And that's all I had.
Any questions for Laura?
Nope. Thank you, Laura.
All right, the next section is nutrition promotion. And some of the changes that we made from the original policy starts on page 16. So on page 16, letter E at the bottom, that was in our original policy, and we are recommending to strike that. It says, all foods offered on the school campus during the school day shall comply with current USDA guidelines, and it goes on. The reason we struck that out was because we cannot control for classroom parties or holiday celebrations or food fests in the foreign language or world language classes. So since we can't comply, we could, but since we don't feel the need to comply every single moment of the day with those, we are recommending striking that out.
So
That's a
D,
good idea.
so D comes out, is that?
E.
E
comes out.
E, which is already stricken on page 16. And
Okay.
then what we stated instead on page 17 was that any food and beverage provided other than through the scale or the sale through food service program would be based on the food and beverage standards approved by the superintendent. So we already have shared food guidelines in place for the school district, so we felt that that gave us the flexibility we needed while also still putting some restrictions.
What's the difference
in
between
D?
D and E?
Yeah.
Should be striking D too.
Give me 1 second, please.
And then I have a question.
In D, they state it's what's being sold in the schools.
Thank you, Laura.
And E, it's what's being offered. So it would be like parents bringing in, is what E is addressing.
So we're following USDA guidelines for the food that we're selling
Correct.
And
But-
serving.
and serving, but any foods for a club, foreign language, or parents bringing in.
Team
or
dinners.
Team dinners or spaghetti night dinners, we're not quite following those guidelines.
Correct.
So it allows us some flexibility.
Correct.
Okay.
Where does it make that distinction?
It says all food items and beverages available for sale under D, and then E is all foods offered.
Promoted or promoted?
I don't see why you don't strike C too.
That's all right.
I'm serious. I mean, Michelle Obama's out of office, so why the hell are we doing what they wanted us to do?
There's still food guidelines, that are still in federal law.
It's federal law that we can't sell anything in the schools that is not USDA approved.
As far as I understand, correct, and there was recently, I think, I don't know his title, but the new gentleman was talking about relaxing those guidelines, but it hasn't happened
Hasn't
as of yet.
Oh, jeez.
But it's all part of, we get federal reimbursements, George, help me out if I misspeak, but we get federal reimbursements for our meals. If we don't follow the guidelines, we would be forfeiting those reimbursements.
That is correct.
I'm good with it.
I'm good with that.
I just think we let the
It's
kids
unfunded
be
mandates again
Yeah.
and again and again and again.
Yeah.
So, but right now, we can't afford to not take any kind of options or funding that we can get our hands on, since our governor's stuck it to us again.
I know.
So we okay, at least livable for those couple days?
I just hope they love kale brownies, that's all.
Black bean brownies, too.
Black bean brownies, okay.
Bean brownies.
On page 18, the first one that's stricken, that was originally there, it says the food service program will strive to be financially self-supporting. However, if it is necessary to subsidize the operation, it will not be through the sale of foods with minimal nutritious value. Sometimes we don't feel a policy should make just an altruistic statement that doesn't
Yep.
mean a whole lot. It should make the rules and guidelines. So we felt that, we know we're not gonna do that, and we know that that it's the goal to be self-sustaining, so we didn't feel that that was necessary. On page 19, the second comment down, the school service program, it originally was shall, we changed it to may involve, because shall means we've got to include all of those groups all the time. May gives us some flexibility there. And that ends the changes that the Wellness Committee made from the original version of the policy. Any more questions or comments on that section?
Nope, nice job.
We got one more.
One more?
Mr. Pollock's there. He's there to talk about the policy evaluation and reporting that's required.
Nothing controversial in my section. If you look on
We'll
page,
determine that, sir.
nothing perceived to be controversial. So on 21, it just, it states that our committee's going to meet at least 4 times a year. That's the underlined section. And it already included, some of the folks mentioned there, but then we're also going to make sure that we include health and physical education, mental health, social services staff as well when we're making our considerations and such. The next to the last paragraph on the page talks about in review, it shall consider evidence-based strategies in determining the recommendations. That's the only thing that's been revised on that. And then on the last page, this is more or less how the district informs the public of everything that goes on with the Wellness Committee. So the information will be included on the district e-newsletter is how we're going to communicate that information out. And then a wellness policy itself will be housed on the district's web page versus on individual school pages. Those were the changes there on the last page. Any questions on those?
Maybe we could have a 60 calories with the superintendent.
But then it turned out to be like 240 calories.
That's Hey, I'm a little bigger. I need to eat something. All right, so I greatly appreciate the help and the work of the committee. One of our members wasn't able to be here tonight, but given up of their time. And these changes will be for your consideration under the consent calendar for policies under third reading tonight. Thank you, everyone. Carl. You're more than welcome to stay if you want, but.
Richard?
Yeah. So
Good. Go ahead.
I wanted to extend my thanks to the Wellness Committee also. As the person who enjoys Policy Committee, I hope you had as much enjoyment with policy as I do. But as a request, this was up for third reading. The changes were presented today, so I'd like to take it off the consent calendar. I'd like some time to review it, and then we can vote on it at a later meeting.
I don't have a problem with that. There's no timeline for it.
So you want to wish them wellness.
I want to wish them wellness.
Wish you a good school year coming up, all of us folks.
So this is, let's go back there.
So we would just remove it from the consent calendar and then bring it back to a later agenda.
Is the August 17th acceptable?
To me, it is.
It's under the third reading. It's 9A.
Yeah. So it's
Policy
8510.
Yeah.
Yep.
Second up on discussion items, it's kind of traditional at this time of year that we give an enrollment update. So I'm going to turn it over to Jenny Pelko, who's going to share where we're at right now with enrollment for the 17-18 school year. And board members, you have a handout on this as well.
Thank you, Mr. Ryba. Good evening, everyone. So we've been pretty busy looking at enrollment really since last spring. And we are, constantly keeping an eye on it, and it changes daily, a little bit each day, as we are getting either new students enrolled into our district or students that are, needing to withdraw. But overall, I think we're in a really good spot. I want to thank Sue Koheiser, who's our registrar. She's been very busy the last few months, and she does an excellent job keeping tabs on everything. So I'd like to thank her for her help with all of this. So as Cameron said, that you have a chart at your seat, and I have it up on the screen here for you too. So I just kind of want to go through big picture of where we are with each level. As a reminder, in grades K through 3, we tried to keep it at 25 as a guideline for students, and in grades 4 to 5, a guideline is 30 students per class. So we try to stick to that as much as possible, but there are a lot of decisions that go into enrollment, and we want to, obviously, as Mr. Naso mentioned at the beginning, keep in mind our financial prudence as well as overall best thing for students. So if you take a look at the chart, and I'll use Chapman as the example, and then you can kind of look at the rest. So I'll start with elementary here. If you look at each grade level there, I have where we are with the enrollment. And then, as you can see, a third grade at Chapman is in red, which means that it's closed. So if a student would pre-register for Chapman for third grade, we would need to place them at a different elementary school. In the green highlight there in first grade that you see under PR, which is pre-registered, meaning these students have registered online but have yet to come in and actually register and sign up and do all the paperwork. There are 3 that have been pre-registered. So sometimes those students do come in and make an appointment, sometimes they don't. But looking at that, we would have room for 1 more student going in, and then the other 2 would most likely be placed at another building. Because again, we've gone up in first grade to 26 per class there. And in second grade, 1 section would have 26, and then obviously third grade, we have 26 there. So, you know, keeping a close eye on enrollment at that school. And then it goes on to Kinsner, Moraski, and Sarrar and Whitney with all the same format. So overall, if you look across the district at the elementary level, 5th grade is closed at Kinsner. At Moraski, 1st and 3rd grade are closed right now, and at Sarrar, 5th grade is closed. So last year, just to give you a frame of reference, we had 16 closed areas last year. And so this year, we're doing a little bit better, which means as students enroll in our district, there is room in many areas. We also were able to approve all of our out-of-boundary requests. So on the chart, that OBB stands for out-of-boundary. I took those numbers off. We were able to approve all of those requests this year, and only had to place 15 students that were on wait lists at other buildings, which is very reflective of last year as well. There were 15, and you know, out of placing over 2,000 students in the district, 15 students isn't too bad.
Ms. Palco,
Go.
can you just clarify for the board and maybe some people watching what out-of-boundary means for the district?
Right, so if a student, for example, is wanting to apply to go to a different school, they fill out a form and they go on a wait list, and we determine if there is room at that school. And
that's one Strongsville school to another.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. So say at Chapman, for example, they live in that Chapman area, and they instead want to go to Kinsner for some reason or another. They provide us a reason, and we look over all of those forms. They have to fill out a form, and then if there is space, we do approve that. So students that were in, for example, that were in the Chapman area or maybe on a wait list, we put those in first before we approve those out of boundaries. So that's elementary, unless there's any questions on that. I'll stop there for a second.
Nope.
Okay.
How long's the wait list on full-day kindergarten? How many names do we have on there?
None.
0?
No.
Wow.
Yeah. Overall, in kindergarten, we're in a really good spot. Last year, we had, especially as in late August, we were moving kids to different buildings because we were full in both half-day and full-day. And with the addition of an extra full-day kindergarten this year, I think we've done a really good job, especially at half-day kindergarten. If you look, and I'll talk about the average class size in a minute, but half-day kindergarten numbers are really low, which is pretty awesome for our youngest learners to have that small class size and get that extra attention.
Especially because they're only in the room half a day.
Correct. So moving on to down the chart a little bit, average class sizes, went through and broke it down by kindergarten and first grade, every grade level there for the elementary. And you can see the average class size is sitting, again, K through third, we try to keep about 25. So we're under that. And then fourth and fifth, again, around 30, which we are under that. And we have an increase of 1 student at the elementary level this year. Moving on to the middle school and the high school, just talked to Sue today, and we had quite an influx of middle school students already, again, just updating it from last week to this week. So 6th grade sitting at 415, 7th grade 428, and 8th grade 510. And I kind of did the, just to give a comparison of average class sizes there. For our core classes, average class size in 8th grade will be about 25.5 students. 7th grade is 21.4, and 6th grade is 25.9. So I'm talking classes of math, science, social studies, language arts. That's where we sit there. And we do have about 35 more students at the middle school than we did last year.
Jenny, when I look at the class sizes moving from fifth grade, when I look at like third, fourth, fifth, you're looking at like, 337, 370, 370, and then sixth goes to 415, seventh, right around there, 420, and then eighth grade looks like an anomaly with that 510.
Right.
And we've seen that thing kind of move through.
Correct.
Would you expect next year that 376, how much does that grow from influx from like St. Joseph and John's kids or anything like that moving into the middle school? Have we seen enough, do we have enough data at this point to even, certainly the number would go up,
Right.
but how much would it go up? Do you have any
Well,
idea?
If I remember correctly, and don't quote me on the exact numbers, but I believe last year we had an influx at the middle school of about, I want to say about 80 students came in at the beginning of last year, and the majority were both sixth and seventh graders, though, but more sixth graders.
Okay.
Because if you remember that year, we had new sixth and seventh
Right.
going in. So this year, I was interested in that. In sixth grade, we did have the most sixth grade come in. I just updated the numbers. I can't remember. I think it was at 40, maybe 3, and it went up to 415. Seventh grade was probably around 420, went up 8 kids. So sixth grade went up the most, but we're still seeing additions in seventh and eighth as well.
Okay.
And
So,
if we go back to the old De Jong study, they never expected this. The De Jong study was always telling
Yeah.
us that we were gonna hit, in the 200s at some point. So it's actually, it's wonderful to see that some brick and mortar can attract some kids to our district.
But I would expect, once that eighth grade moves through,
yeah.
you're gonna get back to an eighth grade class in the 425 range. So that, the middle school population's gonna go down by about 75 next year, you would think. Unless we see another, the middle school's a big draw. We saw that on that, on the,
We'll be graduating kids, we'll be graduating classes in the 400s, in
Right.
the low 400s, in the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years.
yeah, okay.
It's
That was
just-
it's interesting.
28 kids. Cameron just looked up the exact number, went up by 28 kids in sixth grade this
Okay.
year.
So we got 28 more, when you take we'll graduate
Then
in
we had his
fifth grade,
fifth,
you add
correct.
28 to it, okay.
Correct. So we're up there. High school, staying pretty steady, and overall, they're at, they've lost 42 students
Wow.
for their enrollment.
Hope we find them.
So overall, as a district, we've are down 6 students, so staying steady this year. And then just to finish it up here at the bottom, I did just a comparison of the teacher ratio there, and, we've gone down at the preschool, 26 students, and at Chapman, 23, up at Kinsner, up at Maraski, down a little bit at Sarrar, and then up at Whitney.
We lost a picture up there.
I know I lost my picture.
And is the enrollment at the preschool at capacity right now, or?
No, I don't believe so. They just
So-
added, I just updated that number today, and I think we added about 6 or 7 students just in the last week.
And were those typical peers, or were they?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I didn't ask that question. I can find that out.
This is typical at this time of year because of the mandatory identification by age 3. You will see spots grow, and when we add a student with disabilities, we add a typical peer. So as you can see there, last year, we ended with 128 students. Probably about November, December, we'll be close to that range again.
Okay.
How do you add a typical peer?
There's a wait list, so there's folks that have signed up for the preschool community, or if we don't have anybody on a wait list, we'll put flyers in other locations around the city saying parents that want to have their kids enroll in our preschool. So we've always been able to successfully find, so we could have that ratio that's required by the state.
And then just one last thing I wanted to mention. I know later this evening, the board will be looking at employees, allowing our employees to bring their own children to Strongsville. And just to kind of give a frame of reference, in that application, what we try to do is really make decisions on adding sections or looking overall at placement of students by July 31st. And it's important to note that, approvals, as we continue and enrollment changes daily, we would continue to look at that, and then, you know, by the first full week of September, if enrollment does cause us to have to add teachers, then that privilege or, you know, ability to bring your students here as an employee would be revoked if we had to add staff, so.
Okay.
Any other questions for Jenny on enrollment?
Nope, nice job.
And then the last thing is just a reminder that our official first day of the school year for staff will be on Monday, August 21st, and we'll kick it off with our annual convocation at 8:30 in the high school. First day of school for students is Tuesday, August 22nd, and that's for students in grades 1 to 9, and we have kindergarten orientation throughout the day for both half and full day. And then the first full day for our kindergarten students and 10th through 12th graders and everybody else is August 22nd. So we're 2.5 weeks or so away from getting it going for the 17-18 school year. We're excited to have everybody back. And with that, that concludes my discussion items, unless there's any questions.
Nope, I think we're good.
Moving on to business services, Mr. Naso, I would like to pull this item from the agenda. We found out yesterday that there was an error in the price of the bid, so there is no specific timeline to get this done today, so we would like to correct the exhibit and the item for your consideration and have that on the August 17th agenda.
Okay.
And then next would be Jenny, back up with the human resource report for this month.
Thank you. I have following items under Human Resources for your consideration this evening. Under C1, we have the resignation of a certificated staff member and one resignation of non-certificated staff. Under E2, we have the following appointments of certificated staff members. One appointment of a certificated supplemental contract, and the appointment of a non-certificated supplemental contract. Under E3, changes in hours of non-certificated employee. Under E4, we have 2 changes in status for non-certificated employees. We have a change in status for a non-certificated employee that we were able to recall from a reduction in force status. Under E5, filing stipends for kindergarten screening. This year, we are going to be able to screen many of our kindergartners early on and save them from missing class to get hearing and vision and some of those tests done early. Under E6, we have 1 certificated medical leave and non-certificated medical leaves. And finally, under E7, I have the settlement and agreement. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the settlement agreement between the Strongsville Board of Education and the Strongsville Education Association be approved as presented in the exhibit, and that is found under Exhibit C. And that concludes my report, unless there are any questions.
And that concludes the superintendent's report, Mr. Naso.
Good job. All right, that brings us to the consent calendar. All actions marked with an asterisk will be approved in one vote. We have one modification to the consent calendar, and that is to pull the bus. I believe that was in the consent calendar.
It wasn't part of the consent.
No, it was not part, so we don't have any modifications in the consent
No.
calendar. Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Duke. Have a second?
Second.
Thank you, George. Any discussion on the consent calendar items? George, can you take roll?
Colonel Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Brings us to item 9, bylaws and policies. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Duke. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jane. We do have a request to remove policy 8510, the wellness policy, for further review, and we'll bring it back at the next board meeting. Do we have any discussion on any of the other policies?
If I may.
Oh, certainly.
I will be quick. We have some other discussion where I think the most important policies for the board to consider later in the agenda. The majority of these are just to make sure that our policies are up to date and correct as far as state or federal guidelines. In the policy committee, we as a general rule, try to make sure that our policies can be well understood and can be enacted upon. As a principle, we try not to have policies that we can't enforce and we don't approve and as much as possible, hiding our frustration with some of the amount of law and legal obligation we have. We try to keep them short and sweet. And I'll just throw out that the one that is dear to my heart is bylaw 0157, which brings our policy for appointment to our Polaris Career Center to match the recent changes in state law. And a board member is no longer limited to only 2 3-year terms. As long as his fellow board members think he or she is doing a good job, he or she can be on the Polaris Career Board as long as he'd like.
As long as they
Or
go-
she.
As long as they go to the
Or she.
OSBA conference, they can continue.
I believe that that agreement has been in force for quite a while. So that's all I have.
Donuts always helps too.
I can do that too.
We have a vote?
Cordovans?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes.
Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, so item 9B, first reading for, there's some policy changes. Richard, do you want to?
So I'll just make some quick comments. The first reading
We need a
for.
motion first.
Oh,
We need a motion.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Jane. Okay.
and so in review, when the weapons policies came up earlier, the will of the board was that we wanted to have clearer language that our safety forces in Strongsville do have the ability to carry their weapons within the school district. That was always the intent, but now that's in wording. We did reach out to our security forces, to our police in Strongsville, and they agreed with the changes, that it's a good thing to have it spelled out. The idea being that the people that are in charge of our safety have all the tools they need to practice that, whether it's in the city or in the school district.
No. And that was for
Current
police
and
officers and military who are licensed to carry a firearm, correct?
It's sworn law enforcement personnel, so it did not include military. It
No,
was
okay.
sworn law enforcement
Enforcement,
personnel.
okay. Yeah, for any district, okay.
But that's city, county, state, federal.
Yeah, as long as, yeah, it doesn't discriminate, it's just law enforcement personnel.
Okay.
Okay.
Any discussion?
It also brings our policy into compliance with the new changes to the state law that allowed
Yes.
concealed carry weapons holders to keep their weapons in their car.
Right.
Correct, and the changes that we'd made, they were encouraged, or they were not, it was not a negative, it was just that we wanted to make sure that it was clearly stated as far as our sworn safety officers.
But law enforcement only in
Correct.
our buildings.
Correct.
Correct.
It's an
Right.
important distinction.
I'm gonna vote. George?
Cordovans?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes.
Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
Motion passes.
The next policy is the first reading of the eligibility for residents and non-resident students. This policy would allow, this is the policy that would allow teachers and faculty, teachers and staff within our district who don't reside in Strongsville for their children to attend Strongsville Public Schools without a fee. Although, however, we did have George do a financial analysis to review, but first we need a motion before we discuss it.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, George. So this is eligibility of staff. I mean, I guess I'll start off with my part of the discussion. One, I think that it's our staff, it's our teachers, and I think very similar to every one of us who sit up on this, all the board members and our treasurer, that when your children are in the district, that it makes a bit of a difference, the way you carry yourself, the way you want things to be better, and I think it brings their full commitment in. In addition, it generates revenue for the district. It does not generate any expense, and it and so it's a win that way. It's a win in a number of ways. And so I think it's a really good idea, and I'm for it. I know there are some, we've received some email from people who are opposed to the idea, and I get why they are. But I just think it's a good idea. I think it ties in our teachers, it ties in, it generates revenue, and it's for the best. And we're gonna monitor our class sizes to make sure that it doesn't cause us to add classes or teachers or anything like that. So if we got an open seat, we could fill it with a teacher's child. So I think that's a great thing.
And Mr. Naso, I think that's a good point. I agree with you, because if we have sunk cost in the infrastructure and the staff that we have on board already anyway, allowing the teachers to bring their kids in, the staff to bring their kids in, like you said, we get, even though we have a dedicated staff already, there's more buy-in there if your own kids are in the district. And if it doesn't add to the overhead and it doesn't take away or cost us money, in fact, we gain money from the state reimbursements, and the treasurer has provided that information here about.
Could you show that, George?
Yeah, well, I was gonna ask if he'd go up there and say that, but I tend to agree with you. I think we could try this at least. We can always turn it off.
Right.
And, as Jenny said, if.
No, we gotta see what everyone, I wanna hear what George and Jane and Richard all think
Yeah, but I
as
mean,
well,
as
so.
Jenny said, if we get a point where we need to get a local kid into the class, we can just revoke the permission.
Right.
Ready? All right, so, let's continue with the discussion. So what does an open enrollment student bring to the district in terms of revenue? Right now, the state funding formula amount for an open enrollment student coming in or coming out is $6,000 total. And right now, we're anticipating that number of employees that might be interested in this is 13 at a minimum. So that would give us an additional state funding or offset of $78,000. And we don't anticipate any additional expenses, as these students will be selected and evaluated based upon availability of open seats. So the analogy that I like to use is this works as, think of an airplane with open seats on an airplane. This works if you have open seats and if you fill those seats, you don't have to open up another airplane. So you have the classroom, you have the seats open, and by adding it, you're already gonna incur the cost that you're gonna have. So by filling a seat, you're adding an additional $6,000. And where I said offset, right now, we have 22.62 students that leave our district, Strongsville residents that leave our district that go to neighboring school districts, where we get a deduction of $135,000 from our state aid. So the incoming 13 would be an offset to that number. So we would bring in 78,000. It would net our expense down to 57,000.
But
That could
George,
also, yeah.
that's for students going to other school districts. You had
Correct.
said 30 minutes ago that this district writes a check out for $750,000, $750,000
That's
to
for
charters.
That's for charter schools.
But still, those are students that are not being educated in our buildings,
Right.
and we're paying out. The state's deducting $6,000 from our pocket, even though we're getting 500-ish
Right,
dollars
and
from them.
that number, 750 was for charter schools, going to a charter school. This 22 is going to a public,
Students going to other public
public
schools.
schools.
Okay?
yeah.
Same concept, just going different
Yep.
places.
Different
Yep.
rapids, yeah.
So it would show as an offset it would net the figure. So if we would have more than 22 coming in, then that would be a positive. The next slide I have is, you see a bunch of numbers up there. It's a state funding formula on how it works for our current students. It's kind of a, say, convoluted formula. In a sense, there's a lot of factors. There's 13 different factors for it. And the first one is the opportunity grant. And the way to think of it is kind of like a backpack approach. So the opportunity grant, every student in the district gets that flat $6,000. And then the way it works with a state is what's called the state share index. They basically look at wealth and they say of the 6,000, because of the wealth and capacity of the district, we're only gonna give you 9% of that. So we get 9% of that 6,000. So for our opportunity grant, we get $561 per student. And our formula ADM, rather than use enrollment, the state uses ADM, which is average daily membership, and they look at attendance and the number of average days a student's been in the seat. So it's kind of an FTE approach. So our formula amount, based on the opportunity grant that every student gets coming into the door, is $2.9 million, but the per pupil amount that they fund us is $561. The next few items B through L, those are those are items based on needs of the students. So if we have let's take a special education student, they come in, they get the opportunity grant, then they also get the special education funding that's backpacked on top of it. So in that case, they get A and H, so 561, and then 761 on top of that. And then if they were ELL, they get another $105 on top of that. So column A, you see the state per pupil amount, and then B is the state share index that applies, and then C is our state, column C is the per pupil amount we get. Then the last column is the total, and then lastly is our transitional aid. So how that works is items A through L are summed up, and then these numbers are based on the last biennium budget, and what the guarantee looked at was if your state funding was less than the previous year, you get the delta to bring you back up to guarantee. At least you got the same level of state funding from the previous year. So all in all, in state funding for our current students, we received $9.1 million. If we take the formula ADM and divide that to get a per pupil amount, it's 1,739. That's one way of looking at it, but in order to get those additional funds, some of those kids have to carry certain criteria. For the open enrollment students, the state share index does not apply. You get the flat $6,000 from the state, and for anyone's coming out, the flat $6,000 gets deducted as well. So for us, we already have the kids coming out. Any additional students that we receive through open enrollment, we would get the entire $6,000, so it would be an increase.
Are there certain districts that are at, I'm sure there are, right? Their state share index is 100%?
When I was at Cleveland, it wasn't 100, but it was pretty close.
Last I heard, there's no district at 100%, but there's some that are
95.
closer than others.
Yeah, Cleveland was pretty close. It was in the 90s.
Your last page?
And the last page is, as a reference, our revenue per pupil and our expenditures per pupil for the last 4 years. The latest info I have is from school year 2016. I got this data just to be consistent from a district profile report provided by ODE. So for comparison, or for a reference point, our revenue per pupil right now, this is all of our revenue, state dollars, tax dollars, is $14,623, and our expenditures per pupil is $12,785. I just also want to point out with these numbers, just to know, most of our revenues and expenditures are going to occur with regards to the number of students. So the number it's the total revenues and total expenditures divided by the number of students. So the denominator can change based on the number of students. So as you see, the revenues per pupil kind of was going up in previous years, but it's a combination. Yeah, it's gone up a little bit, but we've also had a reduction in enrollment as well. So
None of our property taxes are based on the number of students, correct?
no,
Most
it's
of
based on valuation.
most of the revenue and expenses, essentially, a good chunk of it is fixed within a
Right.
certain range, right?
Right. The majority of it, yes. I mean, it could change based, our biggest expense is salary and benefits, and as long as we're not adding positions, that's fixed, but if we need to add positions or decrease positions because of change in revenues, you'll see a change in there.
But what we're saying is we're not gonna allow that to happen.
Correct, right,
We're just filling in empty seats.
right.
Does anybody see any downside to this? I mean, you guys, anybody wanna?
Space it.
So we had healthy discussion at our last board meeting about this, and it should be obvious that the board isn't in 100% agreement. The thing that I bring up is, again, I think the comments that Carl and Duke have made are useful and important. I agree, getting buy-in on our teachers, those are all important things. We have a principle that if you want to go to Strongsville Public Schools, you're a resident of Strongsville. This, I don't want to say fundamentally changes it, but it does make a small change to it. We are, as Jenny has pointed out, we have some classes that are very close to capacity. Will this occur first year? Probably not. At some point, I envision having some very tough decisions where, a parent, a teacher's child has been here for 3 or 4 years, and suddenly we're in a position of saying, we're very sorry. Your child has made great relationships, is benefiting, and we can't do it anymore. So sorry, too bad. I don't want to be in that position. And we do have capacity issues, especially at the elementary school. But again, I do want to respect that we are talking about potentially a small group. The biggest issue I have fundamentally is, although it is revenue generating, every time we talk about how when a student leaves Strongsville, they take that we get a $6,000 deduction, and we don't get nearly that much money. And we are justifiably horked about it. There is no reasonableness to it. There is no explanation. $6,000 is deducted every time someone leaves, even though, as George has pointed out, we only receive $561 depending on how you do the math. By allowing students to come in, we are becoming that agent for the other districts. So it's not just $6,000 that's coming in as revenue to our district. There is a losing district that is now losing $6,000 and probably is not getting nearly $6,000 in their state revenue. It poisons the well, in my opinion, and it's a line I do not want to cross. I go back to what I said last time. I would love to have all our teachers who have children bring their students to Strongsville City Schools, and I'll be happy to recommend a realtor to help you accomplish that. But ultimately that, the money, you're right, Carl, it helps our numbers, but we now become the agent of taking that deduction from those other districts. And, right now we can say we're the harmed party and we're not muddying our waters when we go to the state legislator. All of a sudden, we're muddying those waters.
Yeah. No, I see that.
We know how responsive our state legislators have been to our financial situation. And
I
the other
agree.
thing, to counter what you said, Richard, is that what Jenny said, we don't have to put them in any one particular school. There's slots across our elementary schools at different classes where they're not anywhere close to the ratio. So when a staff member's child comes in here, we can say, hey, your option is Moraski or Kinsner. You can't go to Chapman. And if that's the case, and they say, well, great, I'll take that, or no, I won't, that's fine. It's just the option to do that. And like I said, as far as poisoning the well for the other schools, God helps those who help themselves.
I see both points. I mean, I was for this idea before George did the analysis that determined we were making money. So that wasn't really, that was a bonus to me, the ability to offer a benefit to our teachers that actually generates revenue. The only other benefit like that is a wellness program that might help on health, that lowers your medical costs or something. But I was thrilled to death when I saw that it actually added money. I certainly wouldn't have, I wouldn't want to lose money because we're not in a position to spend money. But the fact that it generates money, I look at this as like a fraternity. Strongsville City Schools is like, we're the top fraternity that I know of, right? This is where everybody wants to be. I hope everybody wants to be here. And the fact that these teachers are making it that way and our staff are making it that way, and then we can say, you know what, bring your kids in. Bring them into here because this place is the place to be. And then they can come in. I'm really thrilled about it. I do see the other side of the coin, and I've read some comments that we received. I get it. if you want to go to Strongsville schools, get a realtor and move here, I get that. Sometimes it's just not, I guess it's always possible, but I would not even think of doing open enrollment where you just do open, anybody can come, because that's just a bad idea in my opinion. But for our staff, I can see it. And, you know I got a text today from a teacher who's thrilled to death to bring their kids in, and she was dynamite to my daughter, and I just can't wait. I think it's going to be, it would be a good thing if we vote that way. I see it, and I know that, I get your point, Richard, 100%. What you're saying makes a lot of sense. Jane?
Well, okay, I have a few comments. All along, we as a board and a district have been making decisions based on enrollment and projection of enrollment for Strongsville City Schools. And enrollment is a large reason why we closed 3 elementary schools. We consolidated our middle schools. That's always been our line of thought, concentrating on what's our population of what we have to work with here. So when open enrollment was introduced in 1988, the impetus was to bring school choice to children that were in disadvantaged schools to have access to better schools. And then it evolved into an opportunity for districts with excess capacity to fill their seats while garnering extra revenue. I mean, that was the whole reason it progressed to that, because of the extra revenue. So what does this proposed policy, number 511, mean for Strongsville? In simple terms, it's a benefit for our staff. And I get that that's a benefit, and we're upfront that it's a benefit, that's good. And it provides us with potential revenue. But I'd like to focus on how we define excess capacity. And I don't think the policy as written goes far enough, and I'd like to add a specific condition that says something to the effect of that open enrollment for full-time staff members will only be offered up to class sizes of 95% filled, so that we leave space for that student that moves in, so we don't have to mid-year go, oh, sorry, you're leaving. I think that's a bad route to take, so I don't know if you're open to modifying this policy. And by stating this in the actual policy rather than just assuming it's there, it's going to protect the district from future boards or future superintendents that might not have this in mind, so that it's in the policy, it's concrete, this was the intent. We also might want to consider putting a clause regarding state funding. Should the state change how they magically fund schools or not magically fund schools, that it's no longer fiscally practical and it will be, no longer available. Based on our current enrollment that we just went through, the preschool's not really an option for students. Most of the elementary schools aren't an option. The middle school's filled. I don't know about, the high school class sizes. It's kind of a moot point at this. I don't see how we can even afford to bring in students when we have all of these, so-called registered students that haven't really showed up. I don't know if parents want to wait until September to find out a month into school if they really would want to transfer their student or not. Another consideration is, have we looked at the Strongsville Academy and our online? What does it cost us to put that on? Is that something you're interested in opening up to other people to take advantage of down the road, to garner extra revenue that way? There's just so many questions. I think we shouldn't waive our first and second reading. I think we should take more time to have a more comprehensive policy, or else just leave the policy as is until we can fully vet all these other options.
So here'll be my opinions. The reality that we have with our enrollment is that we're going to graduate 528 children. By the time 5th grade comes around, it's 376. What are we going to do with the 20 empty classrooms we have at the high school? What are we going to do with the 7 or 8 empty classrooms we have at the middle school? In reality, we could take the 1998 wing, empty half of it, put some walls up, and put our entire administration in that building. Because that's the reality. We are losing students every single day. I am not and will not, as long as I'm a school board member, advocate for open enrollment. If you want to come to Strongsville City Schools, move here. My only condition to that is if you've got fine people who spend their time, and I had an employee of this district tell me, well, if my kids are here and the kids are playing sports here, but I live in another community, why in the world would I want to drive back and forth? It's going to be a reason for me to move here. We're losing students. We're hemorrhaging students. Our community's getting older. Jane, to counteract, just to place one of your comments about the 25 per class, if we look at Sarar, our average classrooms in first grade is 18.7. Our limit's 25. Second grade's 20.3, 20.3 for third, 22.7. Now, fifth grade is high. I get that. We have some empty seats in our buildings. And if we provide options for students to come and get a Strongsville education, we gain the $6,000. For me, it's an opportunity. If the state funding does change, I don't have a problem with what Jane said. Because if we're only gonna get $562 per child, and they're not saying that we're not gonna get the 6,000, I agree with you 100%. But if we're looking at a 95% rule, then are we doing it per grade through all of our rooms? Every year that goes by, we're graduating less and less kids. The only constricted point is gonna be kindergarten through fifth grade. Because once that 8th grade class of 510 children pass, we're gonna have 80 less children just between the 7th and the 8th grade going to our middle school. That's a lot of kids. So.
I see both sides of it, and the one thing, you know, we are down 6. This is adding 13, so essentially we're staying, our total population stays fairly consistent. We also have, last year, I believe you said there were 16 closed classes, and this year we have 5. So that is getting better and better. I see your point, Jane. We don't want to overcrowd these classrooms, and
I agree with that 100%.
I think this grid's going to continue to loosen up as we move on, and we always have the ability. I would suggest that I would like to, if we want to investigate that 95%, I would like to pass this policy today because we're getting late into the year and we need to get this. People have to make a decision. I think we can review it and modify it later if we want to consider that 95% for next year. Let's see how it works and go through that. I see both sides of this thing, and it's a little bit of a struggle, but I really think that this grid's gonna loosen up. It's loosening up every year. We've seen it, except for a little jump we saw in the middle school when we built it and kids came over, but I don't think we're gonna continue to gain students at that level. I think we're gonna hold
Carl?
consistent now, so, but who knows, right? But we always have the ability to not do it. We're gonna review it each year and make our decisions.
No,
Yep.
is there any consideration for delaying it for a year? Because that would allow that, what we're talking about, this, right now we have a crunch. Next year, the 8th grade moves out and we get that, what will be a big change, and the class sizes will go down, and it could very well be more manageable. And we also would have the benefit of a year to get all our ducks in a row and make sure we do this policy well and correct the first time.
I think we've got a clear vision of where we have holes, and we have a clear vision of who wants to come in, and we could place them in those open chairs, and we can collect $78,000. I'm not for waiting.
I tried.
You tried. It's a good point, but I'm not. I think we've got money in hand. We've got teachers who are anxious to bring their children in, and waiting a year doesn't get us any more clarity. It makes it easier. It makes the grid, I think the grid will even ease up more, but we know exactly where we're gonna place these students. And if Cameron, if you're telling me, based on your analysis, that you can go through that process and put them in open chairs and not 2 in a chair, then I'm okay.
Yes, in terms of the placement of the students, we can manage that.
Okay. Any other comments by anybody? George, Duke, Jane, Richard? Let's take a vote.
Colonel Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Brozan?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig,
No.
Mr. Miko,
No.
Mr. Nasa.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-2.
That brings us to the first reading, second and third waived. For purchases and procurement policies, I believe this changes the approval levels. I do have a motion.
So moved.
Have a
Second.
Thank you, George.
Mr. Nay, so what this does is, the original policy that we brought, there's been a change in the state law which took the limit for, from 25,000 to 50,000, that you did not have to go to bid, if you were doing work in construction, renovation, demolition, et cetera. It matches what our municipality's limit had. We had some discussion at the first board meeting of whether we wanted to keep that or not. After review, what this policy states is we're going to keep the, requirement to bid at the proposed $50,000. However, any purchases from $25,000 to $49,999 would have to be made with my approval, and then any purchase over $50,000 would have to come with board approval. Any non-construction related purchase would stay as is, which is $25,000 or more. It must come to the board for its approval.
Perfect. Any discussion? George?
Cronovitz,
Yes.
Mr. Grozan,
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig,
Yes.
Mr. Miko,
Yes.
Mr. Nasa.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Excellent. That brings us to item 10, Board of Education Other. Do we have any other?
I have another.
Oh, Jane.
I'd just like to remind everyone that the Singin' in the Ville camp is going to be taking place at the high school with the Mustang Show Choir. It runs Monday, August 14th to Thursday, August 17th from 9 a.m. to noon each day. Snacks are provided and a camp t-shirt and a delightful program at the end of the camp. Oh, it is at the middle school this year? Okay.
Is that a camp for all kids?
It is camp for grades 1 through 8, and they learn some songs and dance routines, and the high school kids put it all on, and they put so much work in it. It's a fundraiser for them for their program, but it's really fun to have. So if you have time and you want to have your child participate, please look into that. You can call, I'm not sure where you can call. You can go online, I think, and get the form on the website. It should be on our website. That's it.
I do have one other, and I'm going to come back to one of my favorite topics, summer assignments. I did see your comparison,
Yes.
although it was woefully, did not have Brunswick or North Royalton, I believe, so it wasn't a true comparison of very close
I can't
proximity
force them to
schools.
respond.
I would, the part that I have trouble with, and one, I don't think there should be, I just don't agree with any of it, but at a minimum, it's very difficult for a student, in my opinion, who hasn't even met the teacher, to do a homework assignment for that teacher. And I think that if teachers are gonna assign homework over the summer, there should be 2 or 3 days where they come in, or for a couple hours a day, and they should have to meet with the students that they assigned homework for. Because the students have no idea how much, at what level do they stop? Like my daughter's thing, she didn't know where to stop, so she did like 15 pages on this. And I'm sure that like 3 or 4 probably would have sufficed. But she didn't know, and she didn't know the teacher, she didn't know how to be graded, so she just kept going. And I think if you're gonna assign homework over the summer, then you should come in for 2 or 3 hours, 2 or 3 times during your break. If you're interrupting their break, you can interrupt their break, and they can show up and work with the students. Say, hey, this is how it works, this is it, let's talk about the book, let's talk about, and especially math, when these kids are doing math things on the computer, teaching themselves assignments, that's not necessarily, some of these are pretty complex topics. So I think if you're gonna assign homework over the summer, we need a little bit of pain on both sides, and they should show up a couple of times, at least 3 times, and have a meeting place and go through it. If not, don't assign it.
Like office hours.
Yeah, there should be office hours. Make it happen, Cameron.
You're here.
Any others?
Yeah.
I have one.
Oh, excellent.
Vicki, how many openings do you have for geek camp? I mean, STEM camp?
We have 34 students, or Strongsville students who signed up, and then I also opened it for all the board members and administrators for their kids to come in, so about 50.
But the key point is we still have openings available? And what are the dates again?
The 15th, 16th, and 17th,
So August 15th, 16th, and 17th
8 to 12 here.
at the admin building, the old Zellers school. And, you know, whether you're STEM inclined or not, come and join and have some fun.
If you can't sing, come to the STEM camp.
Even if you can sing, you'll have more
Come
fun at
sing
the STEM
STEM
camp.
songs.
Yes.
And congratulations to Vicky on the Google Award. Another feather in your cap.
Mr. Naso, just, Mr. Faust sent it out earlier today, but this is the tax-free weekend, correct? For school supplies, school clothes. It starts Friday and ends Sunday. So it is that time that you go back and get those school supplies, so this would be a good weekend if you haven't done it yet.
So sad. All right. Meeting notification, we have a special Board of Education meeting. We have a retreat next Thursday, always a load of fun, almost as fun as the policy meetings, at 6:30 here. It was originally proposed for the 7th, so it's been moved, and that's because I'll be traveling. Executive session?
We do have need to consider the employment of a public employee or official and to review negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. Any discussion? Nope.
Colonel Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
Mr. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes,
Enter an executive session.
8:40.
For me. 8:40.
I don't think we have any business when we come out.
Like a finally honed machine.
Exactly. Be out there by 9 o'clock.